Let's start. Okay. Hey everyone, it's Karen, and on today's podcast, I have author Jay Brice. Welcome.
How you doing?
Good. How are you, sir?
Doing well.
All right.
Thanks for having
So,
me on today.
of course, I am so happy that you accepted my request to come on. I saw that you were an author, and I instantly was like, "Oh my gosh, I gotta have him." So let's just kind of dive into some little interview questions, and then we can talk about your books as well, like
Okay.
a little later with after the questions, or even if within the questions. However, you can intertwine your little authors.
However it comes about.
Yes. All right. So let's go start with the first question I have is, how do you know what to write?
Oh, so inspiration can come from a lot of different places.
Mhm.
And I usually have, you know, a couple ideas kind of bopping around the head at any one time. Uh, and I think what it comes down to is because I usually don't write stories more than one story at a time. I usually kind of focus on one. So it kind of comes down to which one is the one I've got. I have an image or a scene that there's something vivid, there's a
Mhm.
paragraph that I know what this moment has to be. And then I can build around that. So whichever one kind of becomes vivid first is the
Mhm.
one that ends up being written first. Uh, but but the inspirations come from everywhere. One of the key things I tell people cause I teach and I'm actually the creative writer club uh,
Oh,
sponsor. And when
nice.
they ask, well, for what can they do, and the answer to that is read.
Yep.
And because those ideas get from all the different books. I mean, like this summer I've read wide range of books. I've read some classic literature. I've read some science fiction. I've read
Mhm.
some nonfiction on golf history.
Oh.
So I mean, all over the place. But all of these things that you read over time, and then plus your own life experiences, get jumbled all up into your brain and come out at different angles with different that are brand new stories. And you're not, if you read widely, you're not really you are creating new things that are influenced by other things, but you're not imitating. And that just comes from both practice, but also opening yourself up to as many wide influences as possible.
I completely agree with, like you said, have wide variety of everything within your writings and books and stuff. But for me, for my writing, because I'm not a published author yet, but I
We'll get
plan
there.
on trying to do it. I'm trying to get there. I don't know. I guess growing up, I've always been able to do like multiple things at once.
Mm.
So I'm able to have multiple books writing. Just like right now, I'm able to read, I think I'm reading 4 books at once. So,
I, I can read a couple books at one time, but usually even my reading will end up becoming just one book at a time. But God
yeah.
bless y'all multitaskers. Um,
Yes.
I'm jealous of
Um,
y'all. I get through one book and like, wait, I got through 3. How? How can
right. Like, so my thing is, I keep different genres. So I have like Lord of the Rings, the second book, Towers. So that's fantasy, obviously.
you can't see it. The shelf that has these are actually all my books right here, which it's just
Oh,
like
okay,
we'll
nice.
talk about later. But you can't see behind that is my entire shelf of Tolkien.
Oh, nice. So, but yeah, like I said, I have that, and I'm reading my first romance book because I never really like romance, but I feel like as a writer, you have to read at least one of every genre to kind of get the feel for it.
Well, then just go for Jane Austen.
Well, I'm reading 5 Days in Paris by Danielle Steele because I heard that she's
Uh,
supposed to be like one of the big names in romance. So I was like, well, why not? And I like Paris. So I was like, 5 Days in Paris can't be that bad, right?
Grand
Oh,
Paris.
it's Right. So, all right, let's get on to the next questions because I do have a few questions I want to try to run
Yeah,
through really
let's go.
quickly. So we spoke about what kind of inspires you. So you kind of
Mhm.
actually already answered my second question. So we're gonna keep moving along. What is the most difficult part of writing a book for you?
Uh, that is a great question because each story does pose their own challenges. And for me, because oftentimes I'm starting with a scene because I wasn't, you know, you got the phrases, planners versus pantsers, and especially, and I have a tendency probably to lean more toward the latter. Um, and I kind of build stories out from a moment, like, all right, I have this moment. I love the idea of this moment. How do I get to that moment?
Okay.
And so I build the story toward that. Sometimes I write that scene out first. Sometimes I'm building out. I won't write it till I get there, but
Mm-hmm.
um, that's where I start. And so sometimes you do just go, wait, how the crap am I? I've got to get to point C, but I don't know how to get to point B, and that can create some writer's block there. And then sometimes, uh, focus is the thing you got to have, and you've got to keep uh, you have to force yourself to write. As much as we like to think that, oh,
Yeah.
writers just write and that's just what they do,
Right.
we have to, it's, we have the internet like everyone else. So we
Mm-hmm.
want to go down those rabbit holes and social media and what, are the Braves on tonight? There's a thousand things that can distract us. So we have to very intentionally make ourselves right. And that is
Mm-hmm.
sometimes a lot harder than people would imagine. Uh, but then most of us who write, I mean, most of us are not Stephen King. Most of us have a day job, and and
Right.
so I'm a school teacher. So for me, 9 months or 10 months of the year are really busy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on summer vacation right now, which is a wonderful perk. But the other 10 months of the year are we earn that,
Oh
and
yeah, for
uh,
sure.
but so when I'm in those times, and some of the school year is busier than others, but
Mhm.
sometimes it's all right. Can I write a paragraph today? Can I write a sentence today? Um,
Yeah.
you get a lot of writers who do talk about you got to write every day. If you read
Mhm.
writers on talking about writing, they'll talk about routines and things like that. Obviously, again, not an everyday writer.
Mhm.
I have to earn my living elsewhere. I just say you just have to keep at it. It might not be every day, but you need to make time when you can to do it. Uh, and whatever you need to do to find a groove, you've just got to find it, and it can be different from one story to the next.
Mhm.
The story I'm working on right now, I'm almost done. I might finish the first draft actually after we're done with our conversation today, which will be fantastic.
Yay!
um, that story has come like this. I mean, I've written it. It's going to be over 6,000 words, and I'm going to write it in the first draft will be done in about 4 days,
Oh no.
which is really good for me. Now, um, my detective novel up here is about eight. It's just a little novella, about 18,000 words. That was a weird circumstance that resulted in 18,000 words in about 6 days. That is
Okay.
rare. That's very rare for me.
Yeah.
There's a lot more plugging along for me. You got to slog through things, but this
Mhm.
one's come easy. I've been typing it out as the first draft, but the story I finished at the beginning of this, I started right at the end of the school year and wrote it uh, kind of into May and early June.
Mhm.
The reason that got done is because I stopped typing and took a yellow legal pad and started going to the coffee shop. I'm like, okay, I need complete separation from everything, and just this is what's in front of me.
Right.
And so that, you know, again, each story's got a different challenge. You just got to, but you've got to find a groove, and you've got to keep forcing yourself to come back to it.
Yep. I 100% agree because, like you said, Not all of us are Stephen King. We have day jobs, so I'm the same way. And plus, I am going to. For me, writing is a little bit more difficult because also an online student as well. So,
Day job
yeah.
and night job.
Well, actually, I do my homework during the day at work when I have free time. So, what's nice is I'm in a literature class. So, I mean,
Nice.
it's helpful. But then fall, I got to take my business courses. So,
Hmm.
boo.
Yeah.
I like my literature classes. What can I
Those are so
say?
much more fun.
Right. Who needs to know about business? But yeah, I agree. It's kind of just whenever you can, but try to find that groove and stay with that groove as much as possible if you can. If not, it's always understandable to get
Yeah.
out of that groove for however.
Don't beat yourself up, but don't
There you
let
go.
time go by and go by and go by, because then
Yep.
it becomes harder and harder to get back to it.
Yep.
Mhm.
That is true. So, all right, let's move along to the next question, which is what important advice would you give a first time author?
So my biggest thing would be, one, I've already mentioned, read widely,
Right.
and watch classic films too, because those, whether it's film or literature, if you read good books and you watch good movies and classic
Mhm.
films, there's a reason we still talk about them. They've stood the test of time. They tell us a lot about how stories can be told, how characters can be written, and how they can be used. And as if you have all of the, if you're learning as you read, as you watch movies, those are all great. And then I tell, especially for when you're really starting to write, the two hardest things are to start and to finish. Start, you got to have confidence. You got to say,
Right.
all right, I've got an idea and it's worth telling. And you do have an idea and it is worth telling. So go ahead and do it. But you've got
Yeah.
to get your cycle over yourself psychologically to do that. And
Yeah.
then once you start, you then have to, you're going to be discouraged. You're going to say, I can't figure out what to do next. I wrote a page and I hated everything on there. I'm going to delete it all and
Yeah.
try again. Actually, my sci-fi story, that's one reason I ended up, that I wrote the beginning of the summer. The reason I went to the legal pad was because I wrote a whole first page. I'm like, I like the world that I'm in, that I'm creating, but nothing here should be the story. It all
Hmm.
needs to be deleted. So I basically went to the legal pad because I was really starting over, um, almost from scratch. So you're going to hit those moments, and you have to say, "All right, it's fine. We had a setback today, but we're still going to get to the end."
Yep. Yep. And that is true.
Mhm.
So, moving along to the next question is what are your favorite books to read? Besides your own, obviously.
Do we count as reading our own when you if you write them? I guess so. I guess the
Everywhere.
editing process, I guess, is reading your own.
Yeah.
Um, I have um a lot of stuff I love to read. I do have a pretty eclectic reading list. I do enjoy reading classics, and the new stuff that's published today. It has to catch my eye for I'm not out there um really looking for stuff. So it's me perusing the bookshelves at Barnes and Noble, going, "Oh, wait, what is this?"
Right.
And I'm on. A lot of people really like the flashy colors, the really artistic characters. I like really simplistic covers. So I mean, you can see them up there. None of them are horrifically complicated covers,
Yeah.
but I think they're beautiful. I like the simplicity, and so a small book that's just blue with some white writing, and it just has just the right title and just the right font might go, wait a sec, what is that? Okay, pull that out. Oh, that back of the book sounds interesting. Well, I guess I'm buying a book today. I just um actually just did that with a really interesting book called All the Horses of Ireland. It's a small book, and I don't have it in the room with me, so I'm really sorry to the author that I don't remember your name. right now, but the book was really good. It was just a short little book about how the horses of Ireland end up in that they're known for end up in Ireland, and it's
Oh,
a nice little fan's only about I only know it was 150 pages, maybe it was just over 100.
yeah.
Uh, so those things catch my eye, but then I also go, okay, I want to read um, something from the Bloomsbury group. So maybe I'm trying to read Ian Forster's Howard's End, or I want to read something from Russian literature, so which is a task in all of itself. So maybe I'm going to try and read The Death of Ivan Ilyich by Leo Tolstoy, or you know what? My favorite novel is Dracula, and I'm going to read Dracula again. Um,
Yeah.
but then I have writers. J.R. Tolkien is my absolute favorite. Uh,
Hmm.
the world building fantasy is just amazing.
Oh yeah.
The Silmarillion is one of my absolute favorite books to read. Which a lot of Tolkien fans I know, especially the non-academic ones, are like, "Wait, you read the Silmarillion more than once?" I'm like, yes, I've read it 3 times. uh,
Right.
I've read Lord of the Rings once.
Yeah.
So, but then also, I don't need the big florid prose either. My second favorite writer is a guy named Michael Shara. Um, he he's described very Hemingway-esque, so he's very clean and to the point. But he's also
Hmm.
really creative. He wrote serious literature, but he also wrote science fiction. So, I could see that you could be really creative without having really, ornate prose.
Right.
And so those are influences in various different ways. And anyone from the Inklings, any author from Tolkien Lewis's writing group, I love to read.
Yeah. I like how, so for me, since I'm an artist and I actually have a graphic design, um, what is it? I think they're called passports through Votech.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so as an artist and a writer, I like how you brought up like the simplicity of all your books of how just a simple green background with little white writing or whatever.
Yeah, that's the
Compared to,
the history
yep,
book.
that
The
one.
history book over
Yeah.
here.
Compared
Um,
to one with actually with flashy pictures and stuff. For me, I mean, I'm the same way. I like the flashy colors only because I'm an artist. I'm like, oh, okay, who did your artwork? But I also am with you with just a simple background as well.
and
It simple drag or pulls people to them. I
right,
feel like.
and and I'll give it just a because we can. I will happy to do a shameless plug.
Okay.
But the this is my fantasy novel,
Mm-hmm.
Letters from the Frontier, and it's an epistolary novel. So it's very again it's a pretty simple design. We got the white cover, and my brother has a great eye for photography.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
and he does all the photos. So this photo he just ran through a uh, Adobe filter to make it look like a pencil sketch.
Yep.
It's uh, but then across the cover, I'm not sure if you can see it on the camera or not, but
A little bit.
it's got the writing actually from the first letter in the book is going across the page.
Oh yeah, I
Across the
saw that.
cover.
Yep.
So
Neat.
creative, but you don't but it and that's what I enjoy trying to find is how can I make a creative cover, but within my taste. And that's the fun thing about being independently published is you get a lot more control over that stuff. Whereas standard publishing companies are going to make not necessarily that you'll be completely devoid from those decisions, but
Mhm.
they're going to make a lot of decisions um, for you or direct you toward a certain set of decisions that they want.
Yes. All right, so we got a couple more questions and just a little bit more time. So
Yep.
I'm going to try to run through these last three questions
All
pretty
right.
quickly.
Lightning
That's
round, right? Yep.
okay. When did you first realize you wanted to be a writer?
I've been writing since I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Wrote little short stories with illustrations throughout elementary school. My
Mm-hmm.
granny, I remember dictating a short story about a lava monster to my granny on her typewriter. um, so basically since I was a little kid I have been coming up with stories and telling them, and I just have never lost the love and joy of doing that. And so I've just kept trying to get better and better and better.
I'm exactly like you. I've been ever since, in school you have to write and stuff. It's a requirement. So it all depends on if the child is actually gonna love it or not. And obviously we both loved it, but and I kept writing, we both kept writing and stuff. So and now that's, like I said, that's big important thing is school. It all kind of really starts in your school, I feel like, for children, like depending on what the child wants to actually like and then grow up to be like. So
Uh,
if that makes sense.
yeah, I mean, having a good education helps a lot. I would say that that helped with the more formal skills of writing, but the
Hmm.
storytelling impulse was no, I was making up stories on the scratch paper
Oh
instead of
yeah.
doing my work. um, and I was telling stories at home. And so I just had that impulse
Hmm.
and I just chose not to lose it.
Yeah. And I'm glad you did not, so I can interview you. All right. So the next question is, what is your favorite part of being a writer?
There is just for me a lot of fun. Not every story I write is world building, but Tolkien described writing Lord of the Rings like he wasn't writing it like he was exploring that he was discovering it. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's true a lot for myself as well. And that emotion, that experience of trying to create that story and discovering it is such a fun experience to me. And sometimes I'm doing something, like I'm writing a sci-fi story and it's my story and I get that love of it. And sometimes it's all right, this is a genre that I don't write a lot in.
Mm-hmm.
And like my current one, I write fantasy plenty, but sword and sorcery fantasy is not something that I do a lot of. So the Conan the Barbarian style. And I had this idea because I do enjoy that those stories. I just don't write there. It's just not a natural inclination. And I had a conversation with a friend of mine who's uh, a writer, a sword and sorcery writer. His name
Mm-hmm.
is Shepard McIlveen. If you like sword and sorcery, everyone out there, look him up. He's got some great stories. But we were talking about the genre one day, and the germ started of this story that I'm hopefully today we'll be finishing, and so that's always fun where you can also you're only discovering your usual paths, but you can go out in other directions and find new paths too, and that's just a lot of fun to me.
Right. And I completely, again, agree with you about just favorite part of the writing and what makes a great story, everything just it there's so much out there that people don't realize, but yet that makes a great story.
Mm-hmm.
Like writing a story really takes a lot more effort, but yet not a, I don't know. I don't know. It kind of takes effort, but yet it doesn't, if
Right.
that makes sense. Okay. And so what makes a great story is the last question. And then we can pick, I want to talk about one of your books, your very first book you wrote, if that is okay with you.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine. Well, the what makes a great story is there are so many different things. I think because I love Pride and Prejudice and I love Lord of the Rings. Those are two very different stories.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but I think what they do and and I think all great books do to some extent is they give you your imagination somewhere to run. It can be within the relationship of Elizabeth and Darcy. It
Mhm.
can be Odysseus on the seas trying to make it home to Ithaca.
Mhm.
It can be trying to actually walk into Mordor, um, and it can be all these. But if it can unlock this world that you didn't think existed, and then tells you something, and not even because the writer meant to, but it tells you something about your life, and you didn't expect it coming, and so you get entertainment because stories should be entertaining.
Hmm.
Your first goal, I think, as a writer, isn't to say something. Your first goal is to entertain.
Yep.
But hopefully, as you entertain, again, I think most time by accident, you should tell something. You should say something.
Hmm.
And so I think the great stories are the ones that say something profound, but it doesn't feel like they did. It feels like you got an amazing story, and then you start thinking about it, and you realize there's so much more to it. Those
Hmm.
are the great stories.
That is true. All right, so let's talk a little bit about your very first story or book that you've wrote.
You mean the novel or the short story collection?
Mm,
So
let's do the short story collection, and then maybe later on I could have you on for a part two, and we could do a book of the other one if you want to.
we can talk about that.
Okay.
Uh, uh, so this was my short story collection, The Light of All Lights, which the title comes from actually Dracula. As I said, it's my favorite novel.
Okay.
There is a
Nice.
famous line in there where they're trying to kind of console Mina Harker after she's had a very traumatic experience with Dracula. And Van Helsing is trying to comfort her and says, kind of look around at these men who are going to do everything they can to save you and help you. And he says, there are darknesses in the world and there are lights. And you are one of the lights, the light of all lights. And while not completely true for every story, the idea of doing better, of helping other people, and being inspired by other people, is to be better, is something I think it's a somewhat of a through line through a lot of those stories that I curated out of what I had at the time. It was over about 9 years worth of short stories that I pulled from.
Wow.
Um, and I love to write short stories because novel writing is an endeavor that if you write the first draft in independent publishing, you're in control. But if you can go from a first draft to where you think it's ready to be published, in a year, that's really good. A short story allows you to, yes, you're going to come back and edit, but you can move from topic to topic, from story to story, at a
Hmm.
much more rapid pace. And you don't, for me, because I am eclectic. I write magical realism, fantasy, science fiction, ghost stories, gothic, serious literature, whatever that means. Um, and whatever story I have the inclination to write, I can go after it. And that can happen more rapidly. I mean, one story that I don't know if it'll get published before my next short story collection, which will probably be my next book, will be a short story collection, is a retelling of Gilgamesh in
Oh.
a post-apocalyptic setting. Um, and
Okay.
it's called End of the World Cafe. So those and again, hope it's a long one. So finding a home for it prior to a short story collection is not the easiest thing in the world, but
Right.
it's because length does make it harder to find publications that are willing to take a risk on writers. And
Yeah.
but those kind of stories though are, you know why did that story happen? Because I like science fiction and I like ancient mythology.
Right.
And I'm fascinated by the Epic of Gilgamesh. And there's this one, and so short stories just again allow you to write a lot, create in a lot of different creative directions.
Right.
But these stories also represent a lot of me going, all right, I'm not just writing for my own entertainment. I'm now writing, I think, something worth sharing with other people. And
Yep.
like the first story, the oldest story in there actually is called Nasty, Brutish, and Short. And if any of you out there are had to study political science,
Mhm.
Thomas Hobbes, in his book The Leviathan, wrote that the life of man is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Um, and I'm like, oh, that's a great title for a detective story. It's film noir, and kind of gives away
Right.
the ending a little bit. Um, but I that story is still one of my favorites that I've ever written. And last year, when I published Moonlight and the Tombstones, which is
Okay.
a small little detective novella. If you like film noir, this was a love letter to film noir. But it
Okay.
was so much fun to really come back to that genre because I hadn't really written a hard-boiled detective story since Nasty Brutish and Short. So, um,
Mhm.
and that's the fun thing about the Light of All Lights is I tell people when I'm at vendor space or something like that, I'm like, I've got something for everybody. What do you want? You want dragons? I've got dragons. There are
Right.
3 or 4 stories with dragons in Light of All Lights. One of them's a god, um, like the size of mountains.
Oh, wow. So we have about just a couple more minutes. So if you don't mind, I'm gonna wrap up a little bit
Yeah,
and
go ahead.
I'm gonna do a part 2 with you since you accepted so that we can talk more about your books. Like I said, I just kind of wanted to do a little introduction of you and do a little interview first, and then we can get on to your books the next time. So
Fantastic.
all right. Well, thank you again for accepting and coming on to my podcast. And thank you, everyone who has spent time with us today. We really appreciate it. So thank you,
Yeah.
everyone. And Brice, you have a good day.
Thank you, Karen. Appreciate it.
Yes. Bye.